It was a Sunday afternoon. A man walked to the podium knowing that somewhere in the crowd, someone was waiting to kill him. He had received death threats every day for months. The night before, his home had been firebombed. His wife and 4 daughters barely escaped with their lives. And yet he came, because he had something to say. He was 39 years old, and he had already lived 10 lifetimes. Today, his face is on a United States postage stamp. His autobiography has sold nearly 3 million copies. Heads of state wept at his funeral, but the same government that now honors him once called him the most dangerous man in America. How does a man born in the shadow of the Ku Klux Klan, a man who spent years as a thief, a drug dealer, and a prison inmate become one of the most important voices of the 20th century? How does a man who preached hatred of white people come to embrace universal brotherhood? And how does such a man, at the exact moment he is growing into the leader the world needs, get taken from it? This is the story of Malcolm Little. Detroit Red, Satan, Minister Malcolm X, Yel Haj Malik Yel Shabazz. One man, 5 names, one extraordinary, devastating, and ultimately unfinished life. Malcolm Little entered the world in chaos. His mother was still pregnant when hooded Klan riders surrounded the family home in Omaha, Nebraska, waving shotguns, shouting threats into the dark. His father, Reverend Earl Little, was a Marcus Garvey organizer, a big, one-eyed black man from Georgia who feared no one. The Klan had a message for him: leave town or else. They didn't leave. They moved. From Omaha to Milwaukee to Lansing, Michigan. Everywhere they went, the threats followed. Malcolm was 4 years old when it happened. He later wrote that his earliest memory was being snatched awake by pistol shots, smoke, and screaming. The Black Legion, a white supremacist group, had set the family's house on fire in the middle of the night. The white police and fire department stood outside and watched it burn. 2 years later, in 1931, his father was dead. His skull was crushed on one side. His body was found on the streetcar tracks. The official verdict: accident. The community verdict: murder. The insurance company called it suicide and refused to pay. Malcolm's mother, Louise Little, was now alone with 8 children. No income and no support. She refused charity and fought the state at every turn, and the state fought back. Welfare workers came to their home constantly. They asked questions. They watched. They whispered to the children that their mother was crazy, and slowly she broke. Not from weakness, from grief, isolation, and relentless institutional persecution. Louise Little was committed to the Kalamazoo State Mental Hospital when Malcolm was 12 years old. She would remain there for 26 years. The children were separated, scattered to foster homes and relatives. The family the world Earl and Louise Little had built was gone. Malcolm was bright, top of his class. His teacher, a white man named Mr. Ostrowski, asked him one day what he wanted to be when he grew up. Malcolm said a lawyer. Mr. Ostrowski smiled the smile that would define the next decade of Malcolm's life. He said, "Malcolm, a lawyer is no realistic goal for a nigger. You should become a carpenter." That one sentence, was the bullet that sent Malcolm Little's life on a very different trajectory. At 15, Malcolm went to Boston to live with his half-sister Ella, a strong, black, no-nonsense Georgia woman who would become the most important female figure in his life. Boston was a revelation. For the first time, Malcolm saw middle-class and upper-class black people. But Ella's Roxbury neighborhood also introduced him to another world: the hustlers, the players, the conk-haired men in suits who operated in the shadows between jazz and crime. Malcolm wanted in. By 1942, Malcolm was in Harlem, New York City's black capital. He landed a job as a waiter at the legendary S'mores Paradise, the most famous black nightclub in America. Lionel Hampton, Billie Holiday, Charlie Parker, they all came through. Malcolm absorbed it all, but he also absorbed the other Harlem the one running numbers, selling reefers to jazz bands on the road, playing poker games in Grand Central Station with a pistol on his hip. They called him Detroit Red because of his reddish-brown skin and wild, processed hair. He was fast-talking, quick-thinking, and utterly reckless. He carried a .25 automatic for the streets and a .45 for the jobs. He snorted cocaine before robberies to calm his nerves. He never thought about the future. In his world, the future was an abstraction. The present was survival. In early 1946, Detroit Red's operation fell apart. He had been running a burglary ring, robbing wealthy white homes in the Boston suburbs with a small crew, including his childhood friend Shorty. They were caught when Malcolm took a stolen watch to a jeweler for repair. He was 20 years old. In the Middlesex County courtroom, Shorty and Malcolm waited for sentencing. Shorty, not understanding the word concurrently, counted every charge over 100 years and began to collapse. Malcolm got 10 years. The white girls in the crew got 1 to 5. The judge's message was clear, and Malcolm knew it. They took him to the Charlestown State Prison, a facility built in 1805, modeled on the Bastille. He was 20 years old, addicted to narcotics, and, in his own words, the most violent, most angry, most anti-religion man in the cell block. The other prisoners gave him a name. They called him Satan. In the license plate shop at Charlestown, Malcolm met a man named Bimby, an old burglar, light-skinned, freckled, and remarkable to look at. But when Bimby spoke, everyone stopped and listened. Guards, white prisoners, everyone. He commanded respect not with fists or threats or money, with words. Malcolm had never seen anything like it. For the first time in his life, he was envious of something other than money or power. He was envious of a man's mind. Transferred to Norfolk Prison Colony, a progressive facility with a real library, Malcolm made a decision that would change everything. He got hold of a dictionary, and he copied it, word by word, page by page, starting with aardvark. By the end of his sentence, he had moved through the entire dictionary. He had read Will Durant. He had read H.G. Wells. He had read history, real history, the kind that the schools had never taught him. Then came the letter. His brother Filbert had joined a group called the Nation of Islam, led by a man named Elijah Muhammad. The message was electrifying. The white man was the devil. Black people were the original humans. Slavery and oppression were not accidents, they were a system. And there was a way out. Malcolm, who had spent years cursing God and burning Bibles, who had worn the name Satan as a badge of honor, got down on his knees and prayed. He was released from prison in 1952. Within months, he had become the most electrifying speaker in the Nation of Islam. He built mosques. He appeared on national television. He debated scholars. He was brilliant, fierce, uncompromising. Where Elijah Muhammad was soft-spoken and frail, Malcolm was a force of nature. The FBI began a file on him almost immediately. So did the CIA. Harlem loved him. They would stop him on the street, ask for autographs, just stare at him with quiet wonder. Here was a man who had come from their same gutters, their same prisons, and he had reason. He was not ashamed of where he came from. He wore it like armor. By 1963, Malcolm X was arguably the most famous black man in America after Martin Luther King. But cracks were forming in the nation, in his relationship with Elijah Muhammad, and in Malcolm's own beliefs. Then came the secrets, the scandals, and the moment Malcolm X realized that the man he had called divine was very, very human. It unraveled quickly once it began. Malcolm discovered that Elijah Muhammad, the man he had pledged his life to, the man he had believed to be a divine messenger, had fathered multiple children with young female secretaries in the nation. The same moral code Malcolm had preached, the same purity he had demanded of himself, it was a lie. When President Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, Elijah Muhammad ordered all ministers to make no public comment. Malcolm, who could never stay silent, described it as the chickens coming home to roost. The press exploded. The nation was furious. Malcolm was suspended, then silenced, then exiled. He formed his own organization, Muslim Mask Inc., and then the Organization of Afro-American Unity. But the death threat started immediately. Followers of Elijah Muhammad called him a hypocrite. He was no longer safe inside the world he had helped build. In April 1964, Malcolm X made the Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca. His half-sister Ella had saved up for years to make the trip herself. She gave her savings to him instead. It was the most important gift anyone ever gave him. Nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. Pilgrims of every color, white-skinned blondes from Germany, dark Africans, brown Arabs, Asian Muslims, all praying together, sleeping together, eating together. All brothers, all equal under God. He wrote letters home, to his family, to journalists, to anyone who would listen. The message was seismic. I have learned that not all white people are racists. I no longer believe that all white people are devils. For a man who had built his entire public identity on racial separation, this was a revolution. He returned from Africa and the Middle East a changed man. He was still angry, rightfully so. He still believed in black self-determination. But now he spoke of human rights, not just civil rights. He met with heads of state. He saw the American black struggle as part of a global movement. He was evolving rapidly, dangerously into something the world had never seen. He also knew that evolution had a cost. He told his biographer Alex Haley in the final weeks of his life. The morning of February 21, 1965, Malcolm's house had been firebombed just days before. His wife Betty and their daughters had barely escaped. He was sleeping in a hotel. He was broke just $150 to his name and had called Alex Haley to ask if the publisher would advance money against the book. He was trying to buy a house. He was trying to keep his family together. That Sunday morning, he called Betty. He asked her to bring the girls to the Audubon ballroom to hear him speak. He said something to her in the hallway before he left, and she later told Haley. At the Audubon ballroom, as the introduction finished, a man who would give his life for you, MalcolmX, walked to the podium. He greeted the crowd. He said, "Salam alaikum, peace be upon you." And then the room exploded. A distraction in the back. Malcolm raised his hand for calm. And then the gunman stood up. He was hit 16 times. He was pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. 22,000 people lined up to view his body at the funeral home. The tributes came from Ghana, Nigeria, Pakistan, Algeria, Egypt, China, even from behind the Iron Curtain. The man America had tried to silence had become a global symbol the moment they silenced him. Ozzie Davis delivered the eulogy. His words became immortal. He never finished the book. He never got to see his daughters grow up. He never got to build the organization he envisioned. He was 39 years old. But in those 39 years, Malcolm X had been a son of Garveyite revolutionaries, a child of poverty and state violence, a street hustler, a convict, a Muslim minister, the most feared man in America, a pilgrim in Mecca, a changed man, reaching desperately, urgently, brilliantly towards something larger than himself. He wrote in the final pages of his autobiography, "The greatest joy." He almost made it there. Almost.